Welcome to the webinar, everybody. We have a fantastic presentation for you today. We're talking about access and provisioning for a remote workforce. So joining us are Drew Olson and Mike Sheldon from Tools Forever. Drew and Mike, how's it going?
Good, Chris. How about you?
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Of
thanks for having us.
course. All right, so let's just dive right in. And just a little bit of housekeeping. Number one, can everyone see and hear us okay? If you don't mind just typing your answers in the Q&A box, just so we're not talking to ourselves, because that might be a little awkward. Okay, great. So a couple people saying yes, Peter saying yes. Okay, perfect. Otherwise, this would be a long, long presentation with no interaction. Very cool. And speaking of the Q&A box, if you have any questions, that's where you can type your questions in and we'll answer them live during the Q&A. And also we have some great bonuses for everyone on the call. So be sure to hang out till the end. It's pretty exciting stuff. So let's talk about who we are and why you should listen to us about anything. Tools Forever is one of the largest vendors in the identity and access management space with over 10 million managed user accounts. And we offer a wide variety of solutions, including user provisioning, workflow management, employee self-service, and single sign-on. And we work with leading brands in the manufacturing space, such as Tronox, Haas Automation, and Albron. But enough about us. Let's talk about you and why we're here today. So, as we all know, COVID-19 has had a dramatic impact on the manufacturing industry. We went from our standard way of operating to this new normal of masks, social distancing, and remote collaboration. And these rapid shifts have meant a lot of growing pains. Fictive did a manufacturing report for the state of 2020, and we got some pretty eye-opening stats about what's going on. 89% of manufacturers are reporting a direct business impact because of COVID. So you have things like reduced sales, increases in component material costs, longer lead times for production, and delayed or even canceled product launches. Now, on a positive note, 97% of manufacturers say COVID has created some business opportunities, particularly in areas like supply chain, operational costs, and innovation. So it's the silver lining to this dark cloud. So let's talk about what kind of specific changes we've actually seen in the industry. And the first and most obvious change is this massive shift from being in the office to remote work. Now, before COVID, less than 10% of manufacturing employees worked from home. And I imagine everyone on the call has had that experience as well. But now, over half of companies expect to do anywhere from 10 to 20% remote or more. And the question is, are we prepared for this? Well, no. In fact, Leesman in the UK did a survey of 700,000 employees worldwide. And they found that manufacturing is one of the least prepared industries for dealing with a remote workforce. 53% of manufacturing employees had no work from home experience at all. And I'm sure with some of you in your departments, you've seen that with folks on your own teams. So what happens when you have thousands of employees who suddenly need to work at home? Well, you're going to have some tech challenges. You're setting up tools like Zoom and Slack, Microsoft Teams. You're making sure your employees have access to all of their systems, and you're answering a seemingly endless series of tech support questions. You're going to deal with security issues as well. Things like VPN vulnerabilities. I was reading about one firm a couple of weeks ago. They had to launch 200 new VPN accounts literally overnight. You have to deal with authentication, the sharing, the use, the management of passwords. And if you had authentication issues before, they're doubly important now. Or you're dealing with access provisions, particularly privileged access. So you have to ask yourself, have you defined and enforced all of your permissions across every role? And then you have auditing and compliance. So even if everyone goes back into the office one day, you still want to capture and document all of that credential usage, all of the session activity. So anything that was a problem before is huge now because of all of this new infrastructure we have to put in place. And this vulnerability goes beyond just your internal team. You're looking at every part of the supply chain, your vendors, your consultants, your temporary contractors, their temporary contractors. So every single partner is dealing with the same change as we are. And it's clear we have a lot to consider here. So today we're going to cover some best practices for dealing with these shifts and optimizing access and provisioning for a remote workforce. So first, here's our agenda. We're going to dive into how to avoid the bottlenecks for workplace requests by automating your user provisioning. Next, we're going to explore how to create a self-service workflow for your end users. And finally, we'll talk about the keys to auditing the logging process. So let's just dive right into the first piece of the puzzle, automating the user provisioning process. Now, every time a new employee joins your organization, you're going to have to do the same few things. You'll have to create user accounts for every single application, assign the user to the right role, and grant the right level of access. And this can be a pretty tedious process if you're doing this manually. And actually, while we're talking about manual things here, let's do a quick poll here. How long does it take to provision a new user? Can you do it instantly? Does it take 10 minutes or less? Does it take 30 minutes? Over 30 minutes? Cool. So we're kind of all over the place here. Interesting. We've kind of seen the same things in the industry at large. Now, even pre-COVID, manually provisioning your user accounts was an incredibly time-consuming process. And on average, it might take 30 minutes to provision a single account. And on the user side, this could mean several days or more if your IT department is swamped. And now, with everyone working remotely, you suddenly have a huge mass of new provisioning tickets, and not to mention all the additional apps and services that your users need to connect to. And this is not an unusual occurrence. SHRM, the Society of Human Resources Management, finds that employee turnover is as high as 50% in the first 18 months of employment. 50%. And then this job doesn't just stop with new employees. Companies are also adding applications, your user roles, your responsibilities change. They need different applications. So keeping your users productive means being able to quickly grant them appropriate access to all of their applications whenever they need them. So why do we want to automate this? Well, obviously the first benefit is time, right? The provisioning happens immediately without any manual effort. You're saving countless hours of work for your team, allowing them to focus on higher priority projects. And we've definitely seen this with our customers. And you also speed up the onboarding process so that new hires and existing employees don't have to wait days to start working. So all across the board, from a productivity standpoint, it's a complete game changer. And then we also get to eliminate the possibility of human error. And we all know how this plays out. Teams get busy, requests pile up, and then we see these kinds of issues like you're granting unnecessary rights and licenses to users, or you're limiting access incorrectly, or you're not removing access to terminated employees. And that last one's a very sticky point, especially from a compliance perspective. So imagine during the deprovisioning process, this can take HR and IT departments weeks to implement sometimes. And meanwhile, while that's going on, you're risking data leaks, improper access to business sensitive information while these teams catch up. So automation prevents all of these problems and makes sure you're in compliance with all these current laws and regulations. Another fun aspect of this is allowing an easier workflow between the IT department and human resources. So again, rather than having people in multiple departments input this data multiple times for the same user, an automated solution will just propagate this information automatically into the requisite directories. So from day one, new hires have a seamless onboarding experience and both departments reduce their workload. So it's not just us in IT, everybody across the board wins with this. So let's take a look at an ideal provisioning workflow. So step one would be HR onboarding a new hire, and then the employee data automatically syncs to the network and cloud apps. And then the automation creates the accounts, the usernames, and the permissions based on that particular business role. And the deprovisioning process is very similar. HR logs the termination, the provisioning system detects the termination, and then this triggers the removal of access to all user accounts to prevent that improper access. So again, much faster, much safer. And so to recap, automating your user provisioning will save hours of work for your team, reduce the wait time to get online for your new hires, eliminate the human error in provisioning, streamline your HR and IT workflow, and finally, reduce your likelihood of falling out of compliance. So let's talk about another piece of the puzzle that desperately needs automation is the employee self-service. And I'm sure this is a pain point for all of us on the call. You've probably had to deal with this a few times, where you have these tier 0 and tier 1 requests inundating your department, and you don't have any time to work on the more pressing, more important issues, right? You're just changing passwords and doing these little things. Meanwhile, you have larger projects that are not getting finished. In fact, while we find out, I see a couple messages in the chat about some horror stories. David's saying, yes, I have to deal with this all the time. So let's do another quick poll here. 0 to 5% of requests could be handled by self-service, 5 to 10%, 10 to 30%, or even over 30% could be handled by self-service. No one option is getting all the bulk here. We got a variety. Yeah, across the board as well. Cool. So this is a very good mix here of different folks, all the way from 0 to 5%, which is amazing. It's like you've got everything handled already, to 10 to 30%, over 30%. As we've seen, across the board, that's kind of similar to what is going on out there in the world. SDI, the Service Desk Institute, actually surveyed 12,000 IT professionals last summer, and you can see from their responses also a wide variety. You got 26% saying less than 5%, the same amount saying 5 to 10%, 22%, 11 to 20%, and then above. And the most horrifying one of these is 47% don't measure this at all, which is a big no-no. And then 12% don't use any self-service. So if you're among that 12%, please, if you take one thing from this webinar, look at some self-service options for your team. It is going to dramatically improve the workflow for everyone in your company. And even though self-service requests are higher than they used to be, phone and email are still the most popular choices. So even people that feel like they have things optimized, you might want to look at this again, because 45% of requests are still coming through the phone, 33% coming through email, and only 23% come through self-service. Now, some of you math whizzes are noticing that this adds up to more than 100%, so kudos to you. But what does that mean? It means that people are going through multiple channels for the same requests, which is definitely not the way you want to do it, right? You don't want someone calling and emailing and trying to fumble around on self-service if you can avoid it. The consequence of that, of course, is the time, right? And these are the same time challenges we see with provisioning. Your team is spending hours per week on these small requests, and they're only available during business hours. So it slows things down for your users as well. Imagine someone's trying to change a password at 8 o'clock at night. Well, it's going to be 12 hours until they get that actually in front of somebody. And as the saying goes, time is money. And in this case, we know exactly how much money these manual processes cost. 60% of every phone call ticket costs above $5. $5 and above, $5 and above, so it could be much higher. And then 55% of email tickets cost $7 and above. So imagine if someone's doing email and phone, that's a minimum $12 for that one request. Now, obviously, employee self-service is an ongoing issue. This isn't just like a new hire onboarding where, hey, they need one go and then they're done. They need service every single month. And so here's an actual workflow from Tronox, one of our clients. They have 3,000 employees on 4 different continents. So this was a massive time saving for their team. So what they use is they use a Top Desk, and Top Desk has an extremely convoluted process for self-service. So instead of having to set up this process in there, we actually worked with HelloID, our product, to streamline this and automate all of these help desk actions. So pretty simple setup here. The employees request access through the self-service portal. The manager approves that request with a single click. And then this automatically triggers a workflow without any manual intervention from the IT department. So this was a complete game changer for eliminating these types of workflows. So you're looking at, imagine 30 minutes per employee for times 3,000, 1,500 hours of work minimum for every provisioning and self-service action. And let's talk about the final piece of this setup is the logging process. Now, obviously, we've talked about self-service, we've talked about provisioning, but after the fact, logging events is just as critical. This is not just some afterthought here. This is something you definitely have to keep in mind. And there's plenty of reasons to have a robust logging system. First is accountability. Now, with the sheer number of employees and vendors and contractors with access to your system, you need an easy way to monitor their behavior. Now, everyone knows their actions are recorded. If you have the logging system, everyone's on their best behavior because they know it's there. And then you have to deal with errors. So, when you have automated audit logs, this helps you track your errors quickly and correct them before a major event occurs. Then we have intrusion detection. So if you have unauthorized access to your designs, your records, or other information, you need to be able to identify the problem quickly. And then finally, investigation. So if you have a suspicious event, audit logging is your first line of defense in reconstructing that issue. So if you don't have a logging system, again, if you take two things from this webinar, first is do your self-service and provisioning, and then also get your logging together. And one of the biggest reasons to create an audit trail is compliance. Again, automation is a game changer here. So whether you're talking about HIPAA or Sarbanes-Oxley, these governmental regulations don't just require maintenance of your records, but also the ability to audit those records. And those of you that are manufacturing medical devices, I saw a couple of you on the registration page in the medical space, you're obviously dealing with the CFR Part 11 rule from the FDA. So again, logging is going to keep you in line with all of these different myriad regulations, which can get extremely complex. Now, at the bare minimum, you're going to want some basic data when you're creating this audit trail. First is what event actually occurred. Then you want the user, the system, or the application that launched that event. And then if you have employees working remotely, which obviously we all do, you're going to want the IP address and device type. And then finally, the date and time of the event. And depending on your setup, you may want more data with this audit trail, but this is the bare minimum that you need. Now, all this effort is worthless if you don't maintain this audit trail for the life of the record, right? Imagine you try to audit something, they're like, oh, we got rid of this after a day. Well, it's worthless. So you want continuous record keeping. And this can get very, very complex as the number of systems grow and your trails become longer and longer. So again, some best practices here. We could do a whole training just on this. So if you have questions on these best practices, we can go through in detail in the Q&A. But here are a few to keep in mind. The first is you want to identify and view current access rights based on the job function. So just make sure you have a clear bird's eye view of every single function and what they can access and what they should access. And then you also want an alerting mechanism for changes in access. So again, this is worthless if you don't have some mechanism for letting you know that, hey, something is different has happened here. And then finally, you want to be sure to enforce segregation of duties to prevent fraud and human error. And so for this last point, this would be something like not allowing a single person to run an entire financial process without oversight. And actually, Drew, you were telling me this the other day. There was a pretty crazy situation where a sales manager was able to embezzle a lot of money like this. Like what was he doing? Was he creating fake invoices and then paying commissions?
Yeah, they had a sales director who, they were able to get away with this for, I believe it was almost 2 years. They were able to input in invoices. They also had the ability to approve and pay out commissions, and then they would cancel the invoice and never recollect the commission. So for 2 years, they were generating these sort of fake sales, paying out commissions to an accomplice within the company, and then canceling the invoice. And no one caught on for it. No one caught on to this now for almost 2 years. So we hear these crazy things, and sometimes it's, they're back of mind. They're not always there until they find out it happens. And then something that we didn't think would be a problem becomes something much, much bigger. So segregation of duties is really important for us to be able to monitor and manage on a day-to-day and ongoing basis.
Awesome. Well, that seems like a perfect segue. So now we can actually see what these best practices look like in real life. Drew, you ready to take over and give us a walkthrough on how HelloID helps with all this?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, it was really good information. It'd be really interesting. Some of those surveys that you showed, I hope they go back after we get back to some normalcy in business and really compare, because, a lot of those, there's going to be a lot more companies that wish they had a lot more automation and self-service. in place before the shutdown. That's for sure, and that's what we're seeing. So Mike and I are going to kind of walk through some of the ways that we help organizations achieve some of these goals. And if you think back to the slide that Chris showed earlier, talking about the ideal provisioning workflow, that's really what we focus on. And the really interesting thing in this field, identity management, and even breaking it down further into specifically user provisioning, is that all organizations are doing this, right? Everyone has users. We have any type of user. We have all these different types of systems. We have to create accounts. We have to manage access. So every organization is already provisioning accounts. They're managing identity. They're not always so good about removing accounts when someone leaves, and that's an important part of this. So what we do is we help organizations improve this process. And the end result, when you can automate a lot of these steps, is really benefits across the board in a lot of different areas, right? So you're going to have really increased security benefits when you can consistently automate how entitlements are provisioned. You're going to save a ton of time for your IT staff, for HR, for managers. They're not going to have to be managing this paper trail or emails when they hire and bring a new employee on. So you're really going to save a lot of time. That's also money. And you have a better experience for your employees and for your new hires, essentially, right? And when you have a competitive job market, these type of things all come into play with the culture you're creating. So if you have someone who's hired on and it takes them 3 weeks to get all the access rights that they need to actually do the job that they were hired to, that's a really sort of poor onboarding process. And organizations are getting better with it, but we still see a lot of horror stories here. So what we want to show you is a really basic example of how easy it can be to automate a lot of really complex processes directly from your HR system. So Mike is going to walk us through, again, there's a lot of different ways to do this, and especially with the auditing side, we're not really going to show a ton on the auditing, but you're going to be able to, we can talk a little bit about how all these events are logged for you. But we're going to kind of just walk through a very basic example of how easy it is to automate some of the common provisioning steps that are occurring within our clients. So Mike, maybe you can kind of walk us through a example provisioning step.
Oh, most definitely. So, so with the provisioning, we have our dashboard here. We're just going to jump right into it. So our dashboard really gives you control of how you can manage your provisioning process within our product. So going into it, think about it this way: you have source systems and you have target systems, right? Source systems are the data coming from your HR, your actual demographical information, your employee information that you want to use to create the account. Target systems are downstream systems you actually need to create the account. So let's focus on the source system first. So in this case, I have 2 systems in here in our demo instance. We're really just going to focus on, I have a CSV system here. This one is really just a simple list of employees with their positions and employments, and determines who's active and whatnot. So I've already imported this in today. I see there's a new person already coming in here. I can see the history of when did this occur and such, and then also I can see a list of employees or data that's come across from those systems. Okay, very simplistic for the most part. We won't get into the nitty-gritty details of how we connect, but just to give you an idea, we can connect in, either CSV, either in your local environment or a remote environment. We can also use an API that's out there. A lot of these systems have an API available that we can reach into and securely get the information. So it makes it a lot easier. So digging into this, we go further down. I'm going to go into and show you how we can look at these persons that have been imported. So when you click on the persons area, you can actually investigate further, the demographical information, what their primary position or contract is, department for that contract, and their title for that. Additionally, if they have multiple, you can actually look at the additional ones that are available, see if they're active or not. It looks like this person has all active. We can click more and we can see that there's some past ones as well. Okay, this general information you're usually going to have. So in my system, I actually have a new person that's coming across and through our HR system. It's going to be John T. Williams. John T. Williams has a single contract. He's in information technology, so he's an IT worker, and his title is just core employee, likely because they haven't entered the information yet for his real title. That's fine though. We have basic demographical information. So we know this person needs to be created. We need to know what systems we need to go to and why they need to be created. So we're going to go into business rules. Business rules are kind of the meat and potatoes of how determines who and what gets created, right? So I have a bunch of rules here. If we look here, I'm going to click on active employees. Active employees is anyone that actually has an active contract, essentially. So I want them to fall into a certain rule. Within that rule, I can open this up and show you. We could have entitlements assigned to that. Those entitlements currently are Active Directory and Azure AD. Those are two core systems that we need to worry about. Additionally, we're going to make sure these accounts are active, so we're going to make sure they have access. And the last piece is we're going to make sure they're in the all employees group. So this is very base standard kind of in deployment for a rule. We just want to make sure they have an account, essentially. Okay. The other rules can be used as well to deploy other permissions, group memberships, licensing, any sort of thing that's out there that we can connect to. Before I actually process this account, I'm going to show you the target systems. So the target systems are configurable as well. I won't dip right into them, but you can control the mapping of each system individually using the data that's imported from the HR system. And we have a couple built-in ones available, like Microsoft Active Directory, so on-premise. And then we have Azure AD, which you connects to the cloud using the Graph API. Both of those are native into HelloID. Then we have a Google G Suite, which is another popular application that's out there. In this case, it's not a native application right now, so we're leveraging our PowerShell connector to be able to do that. And this is all public information as well. We publish it, but it just shows a different variety of things we can connect to. So we have native built-in access, we have an API access, and we have PowerShell using the API. So you think about PowerShell, you can really do anything with it, right? It's kind of endless. And it's pretty common for system administrators to know how to use PowerShell, and they use it on a day-to-day basis. So kind of fits right in there. Anyway, so moving forward here, now that I know I have my rules, my targets, and everything set up like that, I typically going to process this in a different way. We can click evaluation. We can see what's going to happen before we actually run it, right? So if I see that, and I can see here, John T. Williams actually needs to be created, enabled, and needs to be added to some groups and memberships, even information technology as well. So multiple. So I know that this is good. I can go ahead and run the enforcement, which is actually creates the account as needed. Obviously, this can all be automated and put on a schedule. I'm just running it through it manually here. So if I run the enforcement, I'm going to go over to my entitlements, and what I'm going to see is that these entitlements are being granted. They're pending right now. Some of them have been granted. It's real time. See it being done. Refreshed again. There it goes. So now I know that John T. Williams is in all those systems with all that necessary access. So relatively quick. So let's go take a look at one more thing with John T. Williams. Let's see what how his information looks like. So if I look at rules, I can see that he's in the active employees, and I can see that he's in information technology. So it lets me audit down where what he's fallen into and why he's getting something. I can then also see what entitlements he's been given. So that's great, not a problem. And the last piece is I can go to accounts and see the core information that I care about within the provisioning process. So I can see that John T. Williams was created in AD and then also in Azure AD. So if I look at AD, we can see I haven't refreshed this, the information technology OU. Refresh that, perfect. There he is, John T. Williams showed up. We got some basic information showing up there. We got some group memberships. There's an information technology group and an all employees group. So that's really the process, right? And it was pretty simplistic. Now from a quick auditing perspective, as Drew mentioned, we're not gonna go deep into it, but we're gonna show you some top level stuff. I can audit on an individual person here and see that when stuff was created and when stuff was done. Also, I can go over to the target system and go into the audit logs and see what has historically happened as well in the past. I can see there was some errors in there too, but won't dip into those at the moment. But there's a lot of information there I can search upon. I can even, at the top, filter that down as needed. Okay. There's that. So as these processes are running, you also may want to get notifications as well. That's when it comes into the notification area. You got create, disable, update, and enable. and additionally, the evaluation summary. The 4 on top here actually provide you as a manager information of when someone's been created or updated as such, or the individual user can be notified. So if they're claiming their account, you can notify them. And additionally, we have the evaluation summary, which will notify you all the changes that have occurred. Okay, I believe I have this in here. Oh, yep, there we go. I have my evaluation summary, and I can see that all the things have processed. Nothing in Google, 1 account in Active Directory, 2 memberships, same thing in Azure AD. So that gives me kind of a quick way to see what has changed in the last previous run. Additionally, you can also have the person get notified or notify a manager, and you can send them the information along an email if you need to. You know, typically we don't recommend sending password, but it's just an example in this case. Okay. But yeah, that's the very high level overview of provisioning. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how that works and how we manage that. Drew, anything else on provisioning you'd like to show?
No, that's good, Mike. And yeah, it really can be that simple, right? And this is why we are really proud of what we've done with HelloID, is because we've really been able to simplify the provisioning process. And our implementations now are taking days rather than what we've seen with some of even our old identity management, but in the sort of enterprise space where some of these implementations could take months. So just like provisioning in general, HelloID and Tools Forever is not the only way that you can automate this. There's a number of different ways that you can do it. We obviously are partial to HelloID, and we do believe it's one of the better ways that organizations can do this, but you want to make sure that it's going to be able to seamlessly talk to your HR system securely, right? You're going to want to be able to use that data to drive a lot of these changes. You're also going to want to make sure that it can talk to any number of different systems as targets, whether cloud-based or on-premise. What we've seen, especially with our manufacturing clients, most of them are in some sort of still hybrid, still heavily leaning on on-prem AD, moving towards Office 365. So you want to make sure that your provisioning system is going to easily work and target any number of systems, depending on the type they are. And the third piece is you want something that's manageable. We've seen a lot of people invest a ton of time and money up front. They build something in-house, or they hire a consulting firm to build something for them. And then as soon as they have some new business roles, or they have some new systems, or process changes, people are left scratching their heads, and now you're stuck rebuilding, you're stuck supporting. So you want something that is going to be manageable for your organization. Even 10 years ago, it was very hard to find that. So you end up with these really complex provisioning systems. It doesn't need to be that way anymore. So whatever you do, find something that's going to talk to your HR system, whether it's Workday, PeopleSoft, Oracle, whatever it is, something that's going to be able to handle provisioning and lifecycle management and on-prem network accounts as well as cloud apps, and something that your organization is going to be able to manage. So again, very high level demo, but the process doesn't need to be complicated. And I think, Mike, I'll move into the second part, which is going to be sort of that self-service side. Obviously, when we work with our clients, we are taking a automation first approach, right? We want to try and help our clients automate as much as possible, in more consistency, more time savings, more efficiency. It's where we're really going to see a ton of benefit right out of the gate. So we kind of take an automation first, and there are some definite challenges there that we didn't get into, but a lot of them are pretty easy to overcome. So we're always going to try and automate as much as possible. But like Chris said earlier, there's still a ton of tickets that are coming in on a day-to-day basis, access request, account changes, password things that really can't be automated from your HR system. So you want to have an easy process to create a workflow where those changes can be made. And the biggest issue we see, we actually, organizations are doing this, just like provisioning, there's a lot of different ways. The most common approach is obviously through your ticketing system, right? Your service desk system, especially if you use a system like ServiceNow that lets you really build these awesome workflows. But the biggest issue we see in this process is the end result still ends up falling on the shoulders of IT, right? You might have a nice workflow to get all the proper approvals, but someone in IT is still going to be at the end of that request and still going to have to make that change. So what we try and do, again, is help our customers create these workflows, right? If I can have the right resource owner, a manager, get the request initially and approve it, then I can ensure the actual request is being handled properly. But then if I can automate the delivery of that, I'm I'm thereby really removing IT as a bottleneck in this process. And again, I'm becoming far more efficient. We're helping our clients become far more efficient. So what we do with service automation is we look at all the requests that are happening with our clients on a day-to-day basis, things that can't be automated from the HR system. We help them create new levels of self-service and automation in that process. So we have sort of, again, a very basic example, but it's a common one we see. But it will give you a good idea of how you can actually build a workflow, but also automate the delivery of that request. So Mike, I've talked too long. I'll hand it over to you to kind of walk through the self-service example.
Yeah, no problem. So we're going to leverage the account that we just created, John T. Williams. Let me just grab his username here. I know what his password is. So let's grab this. And we're just going to open another browser here. So we're going to log into the portal as John T. Williams. We get this all right here, and we log right in. Oh, perfect. So let's just maximize that so there's no confusion. But so within HelloID, there's various modules, but we're going to focus on the self-service. So let's go to the self-service area. So with this, currently John has one single requestable available, one product that he can request. And what the example here is that he needs elevated rights to be able to do something for his job. And those elevated rights can be handled through self-service and then have an approval process behind it. So with this, I'm going to go ahead and request the self-service item for John. And appear to have a slight delay, but there it is. The toast message shows up here, and then admin access has been requested. Now it's been requested, he can go to my products and see it's pending approval. And you can open the request further if you want as well, and see what's going to go on with it. Okay, so we know that that's good. Now we need to go to a manager perspective and get this approved so John can do his job, right? So I'm just going to minimize that for a second and pop back over to the dashboard under my manager account here. And I'm going to go to the inbox. And I can see this request is available. John Williams has requested this. And duration is going to be 60 minutes. So he's going to have it for a total of 60 minutes, and then it's going to be automatically revoked at that time. Right now, I can see the request by going to the inbox, or I can see it on the notification bell at the top. And additionally, I can actually see it within my email as well. So in the email, I can say, oh, dear Carol, the admin access has been requested by John for 1 hour. Can you approve the deny this? And as Carol, I'm gonna go ahead and say, oh yeah, go ahead and approve it. And I'm just gonna click it. I'm already logged in and everything, so its request has been approved. Continue back to that portal, and I can see the state is changing. State is changing means it's being processed right now, and it's gonna be handled, or the admin access is gonna be given to John. In this case, the admin access is a very high level access. They're very, all the keys to the castle type of situation. It's giving them domain admins. Now, we don't typically see that, but this is just giving you kind of a quick way of knowing what it's doing. So if I open John up, when I showed you earlier, he only had certain group memberships, but now he has domain admins. He's requested it, it's been approved, and now it's been applied. And after that 1 hour, that will then be revoked. So it's a great way to delegate rights to someone, and maybe only giving them to a certain time period. That duration can be adjustable in many different ways, minutes to days to weeks, whatever you want. But it allows them to get that rights quickly, an approved sense, and do their job, and then it goes back. So we know it's all audited and it's logged and everything. So that's great. Additionally, but if I go back to John, what he will see as well, if I refresh this, hopefully it's complete. Well, it's still processing. Sometimes it takes a minute to finish the auto login, but it would say approved by, and then Carol's name. I think Carol already handled the request, so he knows that. It also says return date and when should recur. But with that, self-service is pretty endless. You can do all sorts of things, whether it's just a delegated form to do request an account or request access or licensing, or even all the way down to a physical hardware if you need to request a new laptop or a phone. And like our friends that we've done that implementation for is, we can go through Top Desk and do a whole process to make sure that device gets deployed as well, or policies get deployed. So it's pretty endless for the most part. So Great stuff. Drew, is there anything else you wanted me to show with that?
No, I think that's good, Mike. Thank you. Yeah, and just like with just like what I talked about automation, again, there's a lot of ways to do this, but really the key here is to remove IT as a bottleneck, right? So you want to look at how we can increase security, how we can increase efficiency. You're going to, you know, our clients are actually seeing a lot of other type of benefits, right? So rather than making licensing-based decisions based on number of employees, you know, our clients over time are starting to now purchase smaller license sets and let users request them when they need it. So they're not overspending. I think it's something like 40% of SaaS licensing is wasted, unused. I can't remember the exact statistic on that. So you'll get some additional benefits there. But really the key thing that we try and work with, automate first, as much as possible first, create a nice workflow system. Again, being able to manage processes, we use the Active Directory admin example, kind of an interesting example, but again, you want it to work with any number of different systems, right? You want something that is going to scale with your organization, whether your request needs to be handled in a on-prem, your network account, file system, you know, or a cloud application. Third thing is, we talked a little bit about the top desk integration. There are benefits here when you can integrate this process into your existing service desk, especially if users are already used to going to the ticketing system for these requests. You can perhaps get away without having to introduce yet another new portal to them. So you'll want to see some integration there between your identity management system and your service desk. So thanks for the example, Mike. And Chris, as far as the demo, that was what we were hoping to be able to show everyone today.
Very cool. Thank you so much, Drew and Mike. So again, I know it's tough to get a lot of those features in. So we actually have some one-on-one availability. If you have any questions, they're happy to give you a tour with your setup. And that's actually part of our first bonus. We're actually offering for everyone on the call a free automation assessment. So our team will look at your manual processes, evaluate how you can leverage automation in your setup, and then give you some best practice recommendations. So this will be completely customized to you. And the second bonus is really cool. We will actually give you your own environment to try out HelloID. So you can see how these automations work with your processes, your configurations. You can play around with it. You don't have to, you know, be like some of these companies where they're paying up front before they ever actually see anything in action. You get to see the benefits right away. So it's a really cool bonus for everyone. Highly recommend taking advantage of that. And the link for that is in your chat for the contact form. Just put that note in there, and then Drew and Mike will connect with you and get you set up here. And it looks like we have some questions pouring in. So and if we miss your question, feel free to type it again, because I know it can get a little crazy towards the end with everyone typing in the Q&A. Let's see, grab the first one here. So we are currently provisioning full-time employees. Can we also provision temporary workers?
Yeah, that's a common, that is a common request. And certainly we can provision accounts for temporary employees, for contractors, vendors. The challenge with that scenario is, again, what is our source, right? So if it's going to be the HR system, sometimes we see with temporary employees that may not get entered into the HR system, you know, before they actually might need access. So there are some scenarios where our clients have not necessarily been able to automate the provisioning. We might use something like the workflow, the self-service request, to be able to handle that creation process, and then maybe automate the removal of that counter, you know, create those accounts with an automatic expiration date. So it is certainly possible. We can manage any different types of users. Again, when we look at automation, it's just going to be how we actually know that someone needs to be created. So that's the key thing to think about with, you know, any account for a non-FTE or standard type employee. But certainly there are a lot of possibilities there.
Very cool. Another question popping in. What kind of systems are supported with this setup?
Yeah, great question. I'll take the first part, and then Mike, I will ask you to jump in and talk a little bit about how we can easily build connectors for additional systems that we may not already have. But it's really a long list of systems. I mean, it would be hard for me to name it. We have a pretty large, extensive library of pre-built connectors. I think you can find them on our website. We've recently website, and as well as on our GitHub. So we have a lot of different connectors for many different HR systems: Workday, UltiPro, Oracle, SAP, but as well as any number of different target systems. So we have a pretty large library. The cool thing, though, is how easy it is to actually build new connectors for systems. So sometimes there is a system that we haven't worked with before, we haven't yet built a connector, or perhaps it's an older version of a system that we already have a connector for. So Mike, how would we go about the process if someone wants to automate into a system that we don't yet already support?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, like Drew mentioned, there's various ways we can connect, API or CSV or all sorts of things like that. But typically, we're going to connect via an API. And when it comes to connecting those systems, we look at specific tasks. So, are we pulling data? Are we creating creating resources in that system, updating and disabling any sort of information like that? And then we can narrow down our connector to those specific tasks. When it comes to development time, it really goes pretty quick. As long as we have the necessary documentation for that product, which a lot of those systems out there today have it. So we're able to quickly spin up code for that in HelloID. It's all PowerShell based in most of the time in our custom connectors. So we try to make that public where we can, so we can have others contribute to it and improve it. Obviously, there's always room for improvement for things. So, but ultimately, the time that takes, we'll scope it out in the beginning, and then if it looks good up front, then we'll go ahead and push forward with it and get the development done within I'd say a week at most of the time now. So hopefully shorter than that. I've had a few recently where it's a couple hours of work and we're on our way.
Yeah, it's really great. So yeah, there really are not too many systems that we can't incorporate into some degree this day and age. So it's very large. I think we do have the connector library on our website. So if you go to toolsforever.com, you should be able to find those there as well.
Very cool. So it sounds like you can have a completely customized setup here.
Yeah.
Another question popping in. Oh, this one's interesting. We have tried automating provisioning, and to some degree we have, but we've run into issues with the quality of data from the HR side. So how do you advise companies like this that want to deal with automation but have these data issues?
Yeah, well, this is definitely going to be a question I will let Mike answer. And I made sort of a side remark earlier. There are some challenges when you go to automate, right? So if we want to make business rules off of job title, and then in our HR system, we have 50 different job titles for a single type of role, or we just, the organization hasn't done a great job of, keeping their data clean, either in the HR side. It's often true in the IT side as well, and the network side. So it's a pretty common challenge. There are some things we can do within the product to help sort of go with that process. But Mike, on the consulting side, how do we work with customers that want to automate but maybe aren't quite ready, at least in terms of data?
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge, and that can happen. Sometimes you can push forward where they can get through it really quickly, and sometimes it just takes quite a bit of time because you're having to interact with multiple departments in an organization. And it's often there's a lack of communication or a fear of communication in some of those regards. So what you really need to do is we'll do our best due diligence to help you audit that information as we come across it, to give you some best practices on how you can improve it. But it is important for you to communicate within your own organization and show the power how those departments can work together and use one product to do multiple things that you guys are already doing manually, right? So for case in point would be, the IT folks often are at the power of the HR department. Essentially, the HR department enters the information in a certain way, right? Because their processes have to be lined up in their own way for either state or federal reporting. So it's understandable why there's some miscommunication there. So what you have to do is come together and say, well, if we do this together, if we line both these things up, or at least connect with it, we can get the product to work in this way, and it will benefit us on both sides. We can, limit the access to only what you need, but then you guys can get your access quicker, and you can do things on your own. So we can elevate your rights in a delegated manner to get stuff done. So it really comes down to communicating, auditing, and finding the power of everything, essentially shifting left in some regard to the users, so the user can do their own things with self-service. Easier said than done, obviously, but with some time, effort, and elbow grease, you can get it done in a relatively reasonable time frame.
All right. And I think that's it. And Drew and Mike, any final thoughts before we head out? Anything we should know about how to maximize things in the COVID age?
Nope. We just we hope everyone is safe and doing well. This has been a crazy year for sure. And some of the problems that we're solving now with organizations, there have definitely been a number of new problems created since the shutdown, but a lot of it is just a magnification of processes that weren't really fully optimized before this. So we hope everyone's doing well, and thank you for your time. And Chris, thank you for hosting this for us.
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks so much for being on, everyone. And if you need to reach us, just go to toolsforever.com and we will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day.